Hello and welcome to another episode of Lessons from Leaders. Now today I am talking to Martin Mellor. Martin is a highly commercial chartered management accountant and he spent his early career working with some of the biggest businesses in the UK, such as IBM, Lloyds Banking Group, Next and British Aerospace. He established his own business, Mellor Financial Management, in 2015 with the aim of providing financial management and training support to the SME business community. Now Martin combines work as a portfolio finance director with running training workshops and one-to-one executive coaching to help business people cut through the jargon and gain a better understanding of finance. He was named as Advisor of the Year in 2018 at the Yorkshire Accountancy Awards and was also a shortlisted finalist at the 2018 Northern FD Awards. Now I know this conversation is going to be jam-packed full of gems that you can learn from, so grab a pen and paper and let's dive in. Hello Martin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi Barbara.
So to kick us off then, because we're going to have a chat about you and your journey, tell us your background, tell us how you got to where you are today.
Okay, so I suppose way back when I left university as a law student, but who had decided that I didn't want to become a solicitor. So in the game of bingo in life, that is, what are the jobs that most people would find boring? Solicitor's one of them, accountant is another. So I signed up I was accepted onto a graduate scheme with British Aerospace to train to be a management accountant with them. And I spent the best part of the next 20 years working in kind of blue chip corporate environments. So British Aerospace, Next, IBM, and then I joined Halifax Bank of Scotland before the financial crisis, and by the time I left afterwards, it was Lloyds Banking Group that I was working for, but it was essentially the same organisation. And I guess I, like lots of people, had a level of corporate fatigue, I guess, how I would describe it. I was doing an awful lot of travelling, and an awful lot of restructuring and kind of applying for your own job, and just lots of change, which is interesting, I guess, in line with what you do, Barbara. But I just reached a point of having had enough, and had a bit of a perfect storm in that in my personal life I'd got divorced. So all of a sudden there was only me to worry about, and I had a potential redundancy payment on the table, and I was fed up of doing what I was doing. And so I made the choice to go and start a business of my own. I hadn't ever envisaged running my own business. It wasn't something that I kind of necessarily aspired to. It wasn't even something that I thought was possible, really. I didn't really think that what I did was something that people would buy as a service. So that was 2014 I left the bank and started the business in January of 2015. So had a little bit of time out to recharge batteries, and that's where my kind of self-employed journey started, I guess. And even then, so it's 4.5 years now, lots of changes, lots of different paths and different things have emerged during that time, but actually kind of really settled now into doing what I do and kind of really knowing what I'm about, and kind of what it is that I enjoy and what it is I'm trying to do, and who I am, really, in a small business sense. So I set out, so I suppose my kind of core service, if you like, is to be either an outsourced or portfolio finance director or CFO. So helping small and medium-sized businesses that are looking to grow or have grown, where they can't afford someone full-time, but they have a need for a level of strategic financial expertise in the business. And I provide that service. And initially I did that through a franchise. My kind of old corporate head felt that that was the lowest risk way of starting that business. But one of the massive learns along the way, it wasn't quite right and it didn't quite work out. So 15 months in, I exited the franchise, but I carried on doing what I was doing. And I haven't looked back since, basically. And the business now incorporates still those portfolio FD services. I also provide accountancy services to small businesses as well. And a part of what I do that I have grown to love that I never would have anticipated is I run training courses as well. So to help people better understand finance and accounting, and I really enjoy doing that now.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic! What a journey. What I'm interested in is how did you make the jump from law to accounting then? What was?
Yeah. Well, do you know what? It was as simple as I mean, I'm not like, and here's the funny thing: there's a misconception. I think I'm not a mathematician at all. The furthest I studied maths to is GCSE, but I am quite numeric, and I do have the type of brain, and I think what I do isn't necessarily about adding up numbers. It's about looking at numbers and identifying something that looks wrong or out of place or worthy of further investigation, because ultimately there's computers do all that for you, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
So having thought from the age of about 15 to 21 that I was going to be a lawyer, it sort of triggered a rethink, really. And it was a case of, well, what can I do? And I basically looked at what graduate training programs offered some form of qualification over and above a university degree. And it was basically as simple as being a chartered management accountant effectively gave me an insurance policy through life that even though my career has weaved in different ways, I could always fall back on that. And it was as simple as that.
See, yeah, no, I can completely understand that. Right then, so you offer training courses to business owners and people in corporate. Am I right?
Yeah, it varies. Yeah, so it's from everyone. It really does range from someone who's an employee of a business of all sorts of sizes, through to people that own or run their own business, right up to corporates. So kind of FTSE listed companies, and it just the content isn't massively different. There's just a slightly different lens that you look at it through.
So why would somebody come on one of your courses? What is it that they'd want to learn?
Again, it would vary slightly, but fundamentally, lots of people, when you start talking about finance and accounting, just shutters come down in front of their eyes. It's almost like that kind of stick the fingers in the ears and go, la la la, I can't hear you. People have a real crisis of confidence about it. So the trigger might be, I'm setting up a business and I need to understand this information better about my business. Or it might be, I've been promoted and all of a sudden I've got a budget to manage, or I'm responsibility for some people and I've got costs that I have to manage. Or it might be my boss thinks that I need to understand this. So you might, for example, be a salesperson, and to understand the true impact of what you do, having an understanding of the flow of financial information in an organization is helpful. What is consistent in terms of people that I train is generally they know more than they think they know.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. And secondly, the single biggest barrier is the use of jargon and terminology.
Yeah.
So as accountants, we as an industry are guilty of using lots of language where there's almost people have an expectation that they should know it and they should understand it. And yet actually, depending on where you work and how you work, we have 7 or 8 different terms for the income that a business generates. Well, do you know that? Like, is there any reason you should know that? There isn't. But unless someone kind of helps you understand that, and in many ways, what I try and do is give people the confidence to actually sort of almost pause and ask a question, because it's okay to not get it. And the training offers a safe environment to ask what people think are stupid questions, but seldom are stupid questions.
You know, and I love that, because you're right. Sometimes we just don't know what we don't know. And if we've never come across the jargon, or we just really don't understand it and we haven't got a clue, it's all right to ask, and you providing that place where you can ask those questions that you might think are silly, but really not. If you don't know, then it's not a silly question, is it?
Absolutely. And one of the great things, I run the sessions in different ways, but some of them are public, so you could have between 6 and 10 people, all from different businesses, all in the room. And in general, if one person wants to ask a question, there's usually at least one other person that's thinking of asking that same question, but they don't necessarily have the confidence to do so. And it's about peeling back those layers, really. And hopefully you can tell, it's something I'm quite sort of passionate about. Is finance is so integral to knowing how a business is doing and having an influence over it. And yet for so many people, it's a mental block.
Yes. Why do you think that is?
As I say, I think people associate mathematics and accounts, which is not strictly true. People, there's some really good Dilbert cartoons that I use, actually, that are all about it's budget time, and there's kind of Dilbert outside a room, and then he goes in the room and he comes out and he's had his head chewed off. That's how people feel. It's almost talking, I think as well, historically, knowledge has been power for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so people who do get it almost lord it over people that don't.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something that people have used as a differentiator. Whereas to me, the more people that get it and understand it, the better for everybody.
Absolutely. Do you think maybe, and I really don't know the answer to this, it's because we think, or we connect it with numbers and being great at maths, potentially, that we see it as it's a lack of intelligence that we don't know it, or, you know, what do you
People
reckon?
definitely feel exposed by it. And that association with maths is definitely, and also, let's face it, it has a reputation for being boring and dull and grey and not exciting. And for loads of people, particularly those that have set up their own business, they didn't set up their business so that they could do the accounts. They set up their business to do whatever it is that they want to do.
Yeah.
And it is seen as a chore and as boring, and, you know, particularly when you involve
I don't know.
But just if you have other people manifesting with you, it's more fun. And
all of a sudden everything's kicking off my screen now. We'll edit all of that out.
And I think the other thing is, obviously, there's a big link to tax, and that switches people off as well. So yeah, loads of reasons why people are fearful, and they're fearful of looking silly, I think.
So yeah, I think you've actually hit the nail on the head there. It's a fearful of looking silly. So if that's the case, and we've got this fear of feeling silly, what will actually push them to sign up for one of your programs?
Either that they feel they need to know more. I get a mixture. I get people that are there because they have a desire for self-development. I get people that are there because someone has identified in them potential and they want to develop them. I have people that are there because their boss believes they need to understand it in order to fulfill their job effectively. So there's a range of things, but and you get even like some people are scared of coming even to the course. Other people kind of embrace it with gusto. I think, like I say, there are various triggers. So, do you want, or do you feel like you need to understand more, or has someone identified that on your behalf?
Yeah.
Are the main ones.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. You get two types of people. Some want to come on it, and some are reluctant. Because I remember back in the day when I used to do a lot more training than I do now, and I'd get exactly the same, because a lot of the people that were reluctant would identify a classroom as being like school, and they might not have had a great experience at school, or they might, just have not particularly want to go back into that learning environment. So it always used to take a little bit of time just to warm those people up.
Yeah, and it's fairly common for people to sort of come in and say, is there a test?
Yeah.
They almost feel like, am I going to report back to their employer about how they've done if they're there from a company? And I always try and reassure people, it's not about that. And ultimately, equally, at the other extreme, if someone has to leave half an hour early because they've got to go do something, like that's okay. It's not ideal, but it's okay, because the point is it's for them to benefit to the extent that they can benefit. It's not about passing an exam or any kind of benchmarking or anything like that. It's not about that.
Yeah. So what different types of courses do you do?
So I do a mixture of what I'd say public courses, so kind of introduction to finance and understanding finance and accounts, and a couple of variations of that around budgeting and forecasting and cash flow. So understanding the basics. I then also do them on what you call in-house basis. So a bigger company, the FTSE size kind of companies, where they've got a batch of people that they want to put through that training. I also do one-to-one coaching with generally at exec level. So someone who might have risen up from the shop floor and all of a sudden they're in an environment where they're just expected to know this stuff. So do it on that basis. We do also do follow-ups to some of the public sessions. So if someone's been and then they want to check in a couple of months later, do a one-to-one follow-up. And I'm just in development of some online variations. So a combination of resource that you can just look at whenever.
Yeah.
And on a blended basis, so a mixture of types of resource, and then some pre-recorded and live webinar type stuff. So just working on that for kind of getting that out, because again, there's lots of companies run financial training. I don't see too many offering effective online versions, and obviously that's a big way in which people want to engage and want to learn.
Yeah, nowadays. Definitely. It is absolutely nowadays. Yeah. So if somebody was thinking about coming on one of your courses and this was a skills gap for them, and I know it is for so many people, which is why I wanted to talk to you, and why we've collaborated in the past. But, what I don't know, if you could nail it down to, I don't know, maybe 3 to 5 things that they should focus on first in terms of learning, what would it be?
That's a great question. I without being trite, it would vary depending on who they are and what they're looking to do. So probably there's just some language stuff that would really help people get their head around. The second big thing for people is that cash and profit are not the same thing. So lots of people get confused about why that is and what it means and where you would see cash and where you would see profit and why they are and kind of what the implications are. So getting your head around that difference is quite significant, because of all the business failure in the UK, 80% of it is because people run out of cash, not making a profit. So understanding kind of what those drivers are is huge. And associated with that, there are a couple of key principles used in preparing accounts that are really useful to know. So one's called the matching principle. And it's because of the matching principle that we do things in the way that we do within a set of accounts. If you can get your head around that, it's really vital. And then it would from that core of knowledge, it would vary then. So what's your job? Are you a budget holder? Are you a business owner? Are you on a management trajectory? Do you work in operations? Do you work in sales? Would slightly vary kind of where I'd go from there. But those three things would be integral to everybody. And I suppose one of the things I try and do on the finance for non-finance course, it sounds really obvious, but just show people what is on a balance sheet. What does that tell you? What is on a profit and loss? What does that tell you? And what is on a cash flow? What does that tell you? Because to lots of people, lots of the terminology is interchangeable, and they couldn't tell you what a balance sheet actually tells you.
And that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfectly okay. Yeah, it's just to get over that fear that it's perfectly all right to just feel like you don't know.
And with the best will in the world, you can walk out of that room on the day, and I wouldn't expect you to remember some of it. You know, it's okay. It's a gradual thing, and every little helps.
Yes. Yeah. So how do you get them over that fear?
Hopefully, by just, you'll know this, there's kind of tell and then tell again a little bit. But what I try and do is use lots of practical experience and examples, and try and relate what I'm talking about to the business that they work in, and in terms that they understand, and kind of boil it back to first principles. And like I say, just reassure people that it's okay. So we do lots of practical work, lots of practical examples, just to reinforce. Actually, I had a lady a few weeks ago who assured me she was not numeric, didn't get maths, and every worked example she did, she got absolutely spot on. You know, so it's just demonstrating to someone that they can do it.
Yeah, yeah. And the fact that you do not come from a finance background, you're a lawyer. You know, that's the path that you were on initially. So anybody can do it. You just need it's the one that you want to learn.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, let's learn a bit more about you then, Martin. I'm gonna and we'll have some quick fire questions. Let me see what I've got here on my list. So lots of random questions I've got here just to find out a little bit about you. What do you do to switch off and relax?
Well, I walk my dog.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, love it. So I have a very active dog, who, despite the fact he's getting older, could still outrun me considerably. But so a couple of walks a day with him. And I find as that kind of bookends the working day, it allows me to mentally prepare and then mentally switch off.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same.
Physical fitness.
Yeah, it's a good grounder, isn't it? Is walking the dog, just being out.
And they're such simple creatures. Feed me, walk me, let me sleep. That's him.
Aren't we all? Yeah. It's the basis for all of us, isn't it? Yeah. Do you have a special place that you walk? What's your dog called?
Yeah, he's called Piper. He is a German short-haired pointer. So, if for anyone that knows dogs, we go up. We lucky to live in a fairly rural place called Ripponden, just outside Halifax, and there's some lovely moorland near us where I can go. And actually, we moved house about 4 months ago, and the house is on the Calderdale Way. So I'm able to walk out the door and be on the Calderdale Way and up into kind of hills and
Oh,
fields.
nice.
So yeah.
Yeah, good one. Okay, what was the last thing that you watched on TV? And I'm going to include like streaming, Netflix, Amazon. All
Yeah, fine. So we had on record and have started watching something called Chimerica that was on Channel 4, I think, 2 or 3 months ago, and it's a dramatisation, but one of these kind of slight factual, slight dramatisation about the Tiananmen Square massacre in China, the implications thereafter, but in kind of modern day USA.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, are you watching that together?
We are, yeah. We've got a little boy as well, so that the moving of the house coincided with birth of my son. So we pretty much managed to get one program in per day together, and that's about it.
Yeah, I remember that well. But just wait until you can watch 2 episodes back to back. That's like where the magic happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, do you have a morning routine? And if so, what does that look like?
So it's changed. So now, said son usually gets me up somewhere between 5 and 6 o'clock, and I then kind of take over childcare as my wife's had him most of the night. And me and him go and get the dog, and we have a bit of breakfast, and then if it's fine and I can take him out in the sling, all 3 of us go out for that morning walk.
Nice. That's lovely. That's a really lovely routine. How have you coped with? Were you always a morning person then, or is 5 o'clock?
Yeah, I am. I'm a morning person. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I reach a peak. Definitely.
So would you have, before your son, would you have got up at 5?
No, but I probably would have been up by 6:30.
Right, okay, so it's not too much of a change, is it? Yeah. Right then, so how do you keep yourself motivated now that you're self-employed?
Oh, good question. Well, I suppose a few things. It would be remiss of me doing what I do to not say I keep a really regular eye on the financials of my business. So I see the benefits to me and our family in 2 ways. So one, I'm around more than I would have been in my old corporate life, and so those morning walks with son, but also being on hand to help my wife as and when is great. But also, I think one of the things I advocate to people is it's really important to celebrate small successes.
Yeah.
Because it's really easy to focus on what's not happened or what you've not done or what have you. So I try and identify small things that will help just make me go, oh, it's been really worthwhile doing X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, I completely agree. I talk about that a lot because it is so easy, isn't it, just to focus on the negatives or to go from one thing straight to another without actually reflecting and pausing and seeing what stuff's going on.
Yeah.
So my very last question then is I ask everybody, Martin, to recommend a book that has been of benefit to you and something that you'd recommend. So what's your book?
Oh, right. So the other thing apart from walking the dog is I love sport. If I wasn't an accountant, I'd be a cricketer or a footballer or a golfer.
Are you good enough to be any of those things? Do you play?
Yeah. The short answer is no. I'm sort of good enough. I'm good, but without being good enough, if that makes sense.
Right. Oh, that's all right. It's all right.
But I just love it. And
yeah.
I'm not a huge one for reading business books. I have read some and I do read them. But so my pleasure is either crime fiction,
nice, yeah,
or sporting biography type books. So my recommendation is one called 7 Deadly Sins by a chap called David Walsh, who was a Sunday Times and Times journalist, and he effectively identified the fact that Lance Armstrong was a drugs cheat, and so the source of the title is he won 7 Tour de France's and then was stripped of all of those titles, so that's the 7 deadly sins. And the book is all about the fact that this guy suspected him, wrote about it, was sued because he couldn't prove it, and then it all kind of obviously unraveled subsequently. And for anyone with an interest in sport, but also just the human psyche, you know, I bought into the Lance Armstrong story. I had one of the wristbands, you know, with the cancer charity. So to me, it's fascinating to kind of unpick all of that story.
Yeah, fantastic. But we'll put that link underneath this video. So how can people get in touch with you?
I am, well, my website is mellorfinancialmanagement.com, and I'm sure we can put the link there. I'm also on Twitter as @MellorFinance, and you'd find me on LinkedIn just with my name, Martin Mellor, and would welcome contact from anyone, really.
Right, and you'd be open for new connections?
Absolutely, yeah.
And your courses, you're right if I put a link to your courses underneath?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And also more than happy to chat about them with anybody.
Brilliant. All right then. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me today, Martin.
No problem.
And
thank you.
I'll see you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Barbara.